You're listening to Investigation Insiders by Intelligence.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Investigation Insiders. I hope you are all safe and well. Joining me today after a several episode long hiatus is my right hand woman, Josephine Morrow. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing well. I'm happy to be back here. I couldn't resist having the chance to speak to our guest today.
Yeah, I don't think most people would pass up the opportunity. So, anyone growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like me, remembers the prominent role that the Italian mafia played during those times. Aside from everyday life, there were many Hollywood movies and shows that fed into people's fascination. So, today on our show, um, is someone who has two monikers that we are all familiar with. Former special agent of the FBI, Joseph Pistone, also known as Donnie Brasco. How are you, Joe? Thanks so much for joining us today.
I'm fine, and thank you for the invite, and pleasure to speak with both of you.
Thank you. Thank you. I have to say, we've had a lot of amazing guests on the show. Everyone's been amazing. We're grateful and blessed to have everyone be part of it. But I'd be lying to you, Joe, if I told you that I wasn't exceptionally excited about our conversation. So thank you. So for context, Joe Pistone and I have many friends in common. However, we've actually never even spoken until we set up this podcast. And so I just want to give a shout out to our mutual friend and legendary FBI agent, Tom Donlin, who helped us connect. Thank you so much, Tom. So, Joe, our audience consists of current and former law enforcement officials, corporate security executives, human resources professionals, attorneys, etc. So, for those that do not know you, can you provide a broad overview of your career?
Yeah, I sure can. I always know I wanted to get into law enforcement. I mean, growing up, even in high school and college, I knew I wanted to get into law enforcement. And actually, when I was a senior in college, I took a police exam, passed it. In fact, actually, I came in second, and was appointed. But then I found out, well, you have to drop out of college because you got to go to rookie school.
Right.
So my thought process was, I got one more year to go, and I'm still fairly young. Like, why would I drop out? So I finished college and went into naval intelligence instead. Spent a few years there. Got working with the FBI on various cases. Worked with DEA. Back then it was Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. And actually, I took the test for both, and the FBI came calling first. Although, to be honest with you, you know, that was my wish that I could get into the FBI. And I made it and went through New Ages training. My first office was Jacksonville. Now I was at the time I think 28, so I was not not that much older than some of the, the the students, but there were a couple guys that were around my age.
Hmm.
And growing up, I grew up in Paterson, New Jersey, and I kind of knew the streets. Grew up in an Italian neighborhood, so I knew wise guys. When I say knew wise guys, when if you grew up in Jersey, New York, and you grew up in a town like Paterson, there were always a couple social clubs around. So you knew who they were. No, I wasn't fascinated with the mob. They were just guys in the neighborhood. They let you, when you're 15, 16, 17, you're hanging out in the corner, so it's no big deal. So that was my indoctrination a little bit to the mafia growing up.
Sure.
And in Jacksonville, I did at that time the FBI was not deep into undercover work. As far as long term, we did a lot of short term stuff. When I say short term, buy bust. I worked gambling cases, infiltrated gambling houses, bought stolen articles, commodities, etc. And I got transferred to Alexandria, Virginia. Not much undercover work there, but I did a little. And then I got transferred to New York. And after I was on actually the truck hijacker squad, and that's where I met Tom Donlin.
Okay.
He was, I don't know if this is the term that they use anymore, but back then they were called clerks. They were, young guys that were going to college, I guess, at night and working in the FBI offices during the daytime. And so that's where I got to meet Tom. And I started doing undercover work. I was on the truck hijacker squad, and I started doing little undercover work around New York. And then I got an assignment. They had a theft ring, an auto theft ring out of Florida, and I was asked if I wanted to attempt to infiltrate that group, and I did. And what this group was doing, they were stealing automobiles up and down the East Coast on an order basis. You went to them and said, "Look, I want a Mercedes Benz," and they'd give you the color that they wanted and all the goodies in it. And this group would go out to the dealership and hook the car and deliver it to them at a pretty good price. So I was able to infiltrate that group, and I did that for a year and a half. But I also did, it's funny, I also did a little side undercover jobs on the side. And then I get back to New York, and Tommy knows it. Tommy knows this well. Guy Barata was our supervisor, an old-time New Yorker, and on the truck squad, and he had an idea to try to infiltrate fences, actually, that were fencing stolen goods for the mob. And back then, we were losing maybe 4 or 5, maybe more truckloads of high-value commodities a day. Tractor trailer rigs, big rigs, and I had, of course, I'm Italian. I knew how to drive 18-wheelers because I drove them while I was in college. I worked for a company and I drove 18-wheelers while I was in college on summer breaks, so that gave me a leg up. But I was an Italian, and that's what it was.
Sure.
It was a long process. It wasn't just go out there. We did a lot of background checking, and I had rented an apartment in New York and moved out of my residence and set up a background for myself, and I was lucky enough. It wasn't went out in the street one day and walked in and said, "Hey, I'm done." And I was a jewel thief. That was my profession.
Right.
And I went to school to learn about diamonds and precious gems, because if you're going to be a jewel thief, you better know what the hell you're talking about.
That
And after a few months, I got to be pretty, where I could talk to people. I could discuss diamonds and precious gems. And after maybe 5-6 months on the street, I finally, and the idea was to go into bars and restaurants that we knew gangsters hung out in, wise guys hung out in, and to see if I can get in contact with anybody, have discussions with anybody. But I didn't. You don't just walk and say, "Hey, I'm Donnie Brasco, I'm a Jew thief, and I know you guys are gangsters, and I'd like to start doing business with you." It doesn't work that way. But after about 5 or 6 months, I finally made contact with somebody, and it took off from there.
Right. Yeah. Obviously, and we'll obviously talk about this as we go through the show. Just by, I guess, way of introduction and for some context, both Josephine and I have a little bit of a connection to the mafia. So mine was pretty simple. I grew up, my immigrant Bangladeshi family settled in Ozone Park in Queens in the early 70s. So as you're aware, the Gambino family had a big presence here. So I had a chance to see many of the characters that are depicted in movies and documentaries. Like, I had a front row seat for that. Needless to say, a lot of stories which we could talk about offline sometime. But Joe, you also have some pretty Josephine have a lot of connectivity as well.
Yes, we're gonna get confused here with Joe and Josephine. So, yeah, so I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. I'm also Italian,
Okay.
Sicilian Italian. So obviously that life was around me, as you know. And I think for that reason, I didn't want to work organized crime when I got into the FBI. But sometime around 2002, after a year after 9/11, I was asked to join the Bonanno family squad. So I wind up
Oh,
staying,
great.
yeah, Bonanno and Colombo, Genovese primarily for the rest of my career. I did a little bit with Lucchese and Gambino as well, but I didn't want to do it. But then I spent the majority of my career working on organized crime LCN cases. It was interesting to say the least.
Yeah,
So
it is interesting, and you go back to that is that when I got accepted into the FBI, then they do your background, and the I don't know how it is now, but the background was like, forget about it. They went, I think they went back to whoever delivered you. I mean, but it was kind of a holdup. So finally, the agent, actually, I came in out of Philadelphia, and the agent called me and he said, "You have any organized crime connections?" I said, "Not that I know of." Well, it turns out that like a second or third cousin of my father's was a Colombo,
uh,
and I asked my dad. My father said, I know he's a cousin, but I don't, I don't know him. I don't have any, but that held up the background a little bit, but it was so far removed.
they still hired you.
Yeah,
No, I know the feeling. I had something similar. And even throughout the
yeah,
career, there were some connections that were a little like, I don't know about this, but it's
yeah.
all good. It's all clean, as long as they're detached.
But what you see, it's funny because, like I said, growing up, if you grow up in that neighborhood, you grow up in that environment. I mean, obviously, keep your mouth shut. Uh, coming from an Italian family, uh, hanging out, and it's you know, you don't get involved.
All right.
If you don't have anything to do with it, keep your nose out of it. And I think that's helped me a lot in my undercover work because I never tried to pry to gain information. In other words, I just let it come natural.
Mm-hmm.
Because I knew you don't butt into people's conversations if you don't have a dog in that conversation. So that
Right.
that helped me out a lot. And what you see in the neighborhood, what you see is you see these guys that have money, nice clothes, cars, but you don't see the violence that goes on. You know,
Yeah.
and once I infiltrated and got in, then you say, whoa, I mean, everybody knows about the violence, but it's different when you're that close to it. Uh, so it's look, that's how they stayed in business so long, by fear and intimidation. There's no doubt about it.
Well, that was one of my questions to you. Like, was there any hesitation to work this type of work considering the violence that was there? I mean, how fearful were you on a day-to-day basis?
Well, yeah, once you get close to these guys, and because the thing is that if they suspect something, they're really not going to. They don't suspect you as a cop or an agent. They suspect you as an informant,
Mm.
and there's no hesitation in whacking an informant. They're not gonna you know bring you to trial. They're gonna sit you down, and like you know I had 3 sit downs over me, only because one of the guys in the Bananos, like actually the guy that introduced me, Tony Mira, was a Banano guy, and a long story. He went away to jail, got out, and he was jealous because now I'm with Lefty Ruggiero. I'm close to I'm close to Sonny Black, who was a top capo, uh, and he thinks I'm making all kind of money, and his thing was, well, I brought Donnie around, I introduced him around, so I should be getting that money. And he brought up 3 sit downs, that I stole money. That he said we did a big drug deal, and
Oh,
what sit downs are. If you lose a sit down like that, because that's one of the rules of the family, you don't steal money from the family. That's
mm,
a killable offense.
right.
But I was lucky enough that Sonny Black won all 3 sit downs, and there's no appeals. Hey, you lose a sit down in that situation, you're dead.
Hmm,
So you're always careful in your conversations, but you can't be. Look, you can't be afraid, because fear is, these these guys got good BS detectors, and you can show, if you show fear, then it's what the hell's going on.
yeah,
So you just have to be on your toes every day, every minute, every conversation. You got to weigh your conversations and weigh who you're discussing things with. And again, I think it goes back to my growing up in that environment, is that I knew when to walk away from a conversation, so it wasn't like, well, why is Donnie interested in this conversation?
right.
He's got nothing to do with it. So I knew enough to get up and walk away, and that puts a little notch in your credibility with them, because although they might not say it, they realize that this kid's got some street smarts, and he knows enough to, and a lot of times, when I did get up and walk away, several times they said, Donnie, where you going? I said, well, I don't have anything to add to this conversation, and I'm not involved in it, so why would I want to be in on it? So that it just builds up your credibility. And I think, like I say, growing up in the environment helped me out a lot. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in here, and just if you could, Joe, kind of walk us through, like, again, to the extent that you want. Our show is called Investigation Insiders, right? So we try to
Mhm.
peel back the layers and talk about things that maybe are not widely known. Maybe you could just walk our audience. It's shocking to me, especially leading up to this episode, how many people, well, it's not shocking to me how many people know about you and the investigation and everything like that, but there's a lot of people that don't know, which is, again, surprising, and that's just a generation thing. But can you walk us through, like, again, how you got in the first few days, what happened, and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah. Well, first of all, is that when if you're gonna undertake an undercover situation, undercover role, and I do a lot of instructing, and it always amazes me that the undercover doesn't know anything about their targets. There's hey, there's Joe Bag of Donuts, and we want you to get close to Joe Bag of Donuts. Well, I want to know everything about Joe Bag of Donuts. The same thing. I want to know everything about my target group, because it'll help me, or help the undercover to infiltrate. But more importantly, it'll keep you alive once you've infiltrated. So if it's an organization, you should know everything about the organization. First of all, know what violations they're involved in, because that'll help you with your conversation, because you know how to, steer conversation. Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to elicit, evidence, information, for an indictment, arrest, and trial. And then what I want to know is, how violent are they? And who are they violent against? Who do they take their violence out on? How do they operate day to day? Is there a pecking order within the group? Is there a pecking order within the group? Do they have rules? And every criminal organization has rules. Now, you take the mafia; they have rules, and they have a dress code, whether you believe it or not. I mean, I had a thick mustache, and then once I infiltrated and got accepted, they told me, you got to shave your mustache. We don't want any facial hair, no beards. This was back in the day. And we don't want long hair. We want you to dress neat. You don't have to wear a suit and tie, but we want you to look neat. I mean, that was stuff told to me. And then, they some of the rules. And for an undercover, you should know these rules, again, to help you infiltrate and to keep you alive. You have to show respect to everybody within the group. That's one thing. A made guy. Now, a made guy is somebody that's been officially inducted into a mafia family. If I get into a verbal confrontation with him, I cannot insult him in front of other people. Good thing to know, because you're always going to get into verbal confrontations with people. It's not a kumbaya world. Everybody doesn't like everybody. So that's a good thing to know. A thing that'll get you killed, if you're in this verbal confrontation, and say the made guy gives you a slap, you can't lay your hands on him. You cannot lay your hands on a made guy. That'll get you killed. And, who's going to take a slap from somebody and not push back? You can't steal money from a family. That'll get you killed. You can't fool around with a made guy, wife, girlfriend, or daughter. That'll get you killed.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
that's a long list.
Yeah. And like I say, look, you're going to get into verbal conversations. So, but you've got to stand up for yourself, because one of the things you have to maintain, you got to maintain your credibility and respect. If you lose either one of those, you're done. You're done.
Yeah.
So in a verbal confrontation, you've got to push, but you can't insult the guy. But you have to show that, that you're not going to back down. And then if somebody gives you a slap, which happened to me several times, you just got to come back verbally, but you're on that thin line.
Yeah.
You got to show them that you're not going to take it, but you can't embarrass them. And if you lay your hands on them, then you're dead. So I find that, when I teach these classes, these undercover schools, that most undercovers, they don't know anything about who they're trying to infiltrate, or it's, hey, we want you to get next to Joe Bag of Donuts. Well, I want to know everything about Joe Bag of Donuts.
Right.
Or as I say, the organization. And also, you know, during the only time I carried a gun during this operation was when Sonny Black gave me one because there was a shooting war going on. That's another thing too. You know, the people that you're targeting, do they go armed every day? The mob guys know that they don't walk around, you know, like you see in the movies with shoulder holsters. And the only time they have a weapon is when they're going to go, you know, whack somebody, kill somebody. So these are all things that before you go out and actually initiate your operation, that the undercover should know.
And it took a, you know, this is a long, you were in there a long time. So I'm just wondering, like, the build up to get you to that, close to that point, like how much research, not just research, but on the street, sitting around waiting for someone to introduce you or making that connection. I mean, how long could
No,
that have gone on?
it took a little over 5 months,
Just
you
to
know,
just to
because I,
get familiar with people?
yeah, I mean, it came with a bartender,
Hmm.
you know, going in this place and just, you know, and you know, like I said, you don't fool around with the wise guy's wife, girlfriend, or daughter.
Yeah.
And I was in this the one place I went to, and actually it was these wise guys would come in there once a week with their girlfriends and have dinner. And one night I go in and everybody's there, but one guy isn't. But the girl he was with was there, and I'm sitting at the bar, and she goes to the ladies' room, and she comes back from the ladies' room, and she stops and says hello, and I just say hello, and she goes back to the table. So the first thing I do, this is like I say, know your enemy, know your enemy, know everything about him. So the first thing I do is I call the bartender over, and I say to the bartender, I just want to let you know, I want to go on record. That's a mob term.
Hmm.
I didn't ask that. I didn't ask that young lady to stop and talk to me. I didn't initiate that, and he just nods his head and goes about his business. Now, I never had conversation with this guy other than, what do you want to eat? And what do you want to drink?
Right.
Now, this happens like 3 or 4 times, and each time I call him over and say, I want to go on record. And, you know, and each time, you know, it got into conversation, but I always called him over. And then finally, after about the 4th or 5th time, he says, look, if you want to talk to her, you know, you can. Her boyfriend went bye-bye. Well, I didn't take that to mean he went to Disneyland, you know. He went bye-bye. But I said, no, I have no interest in her. So now what does the guy know? He knows I'm a street guy. I got street smarts because I know enough to, you know,
Yeah.
to
Put it
go on
out
a
there.
record.
Yeah.
So then finally, finally one night I come in, and when I'm ordering, he introduces himself. He says, my name is Charlie. Now, I knew his name was Charlie, but I was never introduced to him, so I never called him by his name.
Hmm.
So I said, my name is Donnie. That's another thing, too. You know, these street guys, they don't give you their full pedigree.
Right.
You know, it's their first name or just their nicknames. So I just say, my name is Donnie, you know. And then at
Is
least we get into the conversation. Now now when I come in, he starts talking to me. We talk about sports, you know. And then one night he asked me if I wanted to, if I like to gamble. I said, yeah. And he said, well, I'm going to an after hours game when I bang up. You want to go with me? And I say, yeah. So he takes me to an after hours gambling den, and it's all wise guys. And that's how it started, you know. But
is
that
that
was
where
like
you met
five.
Left? Is that where you met Lefty?
No, actually, the first group I got into were the Columbos,
Okay.
and he had introduced me to a guy there by the name of Jilly, was a Colombo guy, And after a while, then they start having a conversation with me because I'm with him, and I start going out to Brooklyn and hanging out with Jilly, and then I meet. I had met Tony Mirror at the games, and then I had a problem with two guys in Jilly's crew. I actually got into a physical confrontation. So I knew I couldn't hang out with those guys anymore, and I was with them for like 2-3 months, and I saddled up to Tony Mirror, and he brought me downtown to Lily. He was a Bonanno, and then he introduced me to Ruggiero, and then Mirror goes back to the can. So now I became close with Ruggiero, and that's spent the next 5.5 years with Ruggiero and the Bonannos.
I'd love to delve into that a little bit more. If you can just talk to us a little bit about like psychology of getting close to someone, to Ruggiero, his family, spending holidays with them, and then having to put him away. I'm like, how did you process all that? How did you go through that?
Well, I always work in these type of undercover. There aren't, and I don't mean this as patting myself on the back, but it takes a different mentality to work deep cover long term, because deep cover is when you leave your gun, your credentials, your badge, everything in the office, and you're out there by yourself. Your only contact is with the bad guys day after day, and not everybody can do that. It's a different mentality. It's a different mental toughness to do that. And my whole thing was, look, this is, to me, undercover was just another part of an investigation. I never looked at myself as a social worker. I was there to gather evidence. If you're breaking a law, I was there to gather evidence or gather intelligence about your organization, and that was it. I was just doing another piece of an investigation. And my whole outlook was, you were a gangster before I got there. You're a gangster when I'm with you, and you're probably going to be a gangster when I put you in, not when when we put you in jail or when you get out of jail.
Right.
And like I said, I got close to these individuals. I got close to Lefty. I got close to Sonny. I got close to a lot of these guys. In fact, I was stood in as best man at Lefty's second wedding down at the city hall. Spent time with him at his house. Knew his kids. Spent time with Sonny. Would sleep over Sonny's apartment with him. But like I say, to me, it was like, look, and I got close to those guys, but not close enough that I didn't remember who they were. I mean, don't forget, these guys had killed people. It
Yeah.
wasn't like they were just out, being being thieves and everything. They were stone cold killers.
Yeah.
And I knew that if they had any inkling that I was an informant or something, they would kill me. So, and look, after the operation was over, they killed Sonny Black. They killed Jilly. Lefty was on his way to get killed, but the surveillance team snatched him off the street because they picked up on a wire that when they got to the location, they were going to kill him. Tony Mirror got killed. He's the only one that didn't bother me that he got killed, because he was the guy was the meanest guy I ever met. He was just mean. Did I want to see the other guys get killed? No. Because my job was to gather evidence that hopefully put him in jail.
Right.
But they knew the life. You know what I mean? They knew the life they were in, and the life is is today the day I go to jail, or is today the day I get whacked. I mean, that's their life, and you know they kill people for the reasons that that I mentioned, that broke some of the rules, and the people that they killed, might have been somebody they grew up with, might have been a relative, but they got the order, and they lived by that, by that Cosa Nostra creed. Uh,
Yeah.
so no, it didn't bother me that anybody went to jail. Uh, like I say, did I want to see anybody get killed? No, but hey, that's the life they lived. They knew the consequences of their life.
Yeah, that's beyond your control, that's for sure. So I rewatched the movie again last night to keep it all fresh, but I was just
You watch
wondering,
that
like,
movie. I never slapped my wife. Remember that.
okay, that's
Put
good to
that
know. That's
put that
I
put that
wanted
out
to
over
know
the
how accurate this movie was.
put that out over the air. I never slapped my wife.
You
That
got
that
it. You got it.
that scene was put in by the director. That scene caused a lot of disturbance on the set that day.
I could
And
imagine.
I didn't cut off that guy's leg with a hacksaw, and I never had $300,000 in a bag,
Ah,
and we never went to a psychiatrist, me and my wife.
that's good. These are
But
all
they're
good details. I love it.
yeah, yeah.
So, but overall,
But
were you satisfied with the movie? How it
yeah,
was
actually, I
portrayed?
was, and I was, because if you know anything about Hollywood, you're lucky if they spell your name right, and once they sign you, they kind of discard you. They don't want to hear anything. But I
Mm,
was lucky that I signed with a good company, and the writer Paul Attanasio is a good guy. He spent a lot of time with me and my family. Yeah, yeah. They did, and look, you got Johnny Depp and Al Pacino. Come on,
I
Yeah,
know.
I mean,
yeah,
how could you do best? And Jimmy Russo and Mike Madsen and Bruno Kirby. I mean, come on. I mean, the cast. And what did you notice about that cast? They weren't the same wise guys that you saw in every mob
every
movie,
movie. Yep, yep,
right?
yep,
That's that's true.
yep.
Yeah, yeah. They like I say, other than slapping my wife, that never happened. Uh, and like I said, I didn't cut that guy's leg off, and I didn't have 300,000 in a bag. And we never saw a psychiatrist. That they were pretty. It's pretty much on the money.
Were you actually at the scene when they killed the
No,
three?
I wasn't.
Okay.
No, no. That's movie.
I know, I know.
I found out later that I was supposed to be on the cleanup crew,
Okay.
and then at the last minute they canceled me out.
Okay.
Uh, so
Lucky for you. Can you talk to us a little bit about how life was after the assignment?
yeah,
Okay.
when the operation was over, actually the scene where the FBI went and talked to Sonny Black and the guys, that happened, and they didn't believe it. Uh, they thought that the FBI had kidnapped me and was trying to turn me into an informant.
Mm,
And then finally, finally when so many indictments came out, and then they finally realized I was an undercover agent. Uh, the commission put a $500,000 contract out on me, and that basically because they their feeling was that I overstepped the boundaries, in that I spent time with them and their families, and broke bread with them.
mm,
In fact, a couple of years, one of the trials, which was like maybe 2 years after the operation went down, Nikki Marangella, who was who was one of the underbosses when I first got in. I get off the stand and I'm walking by the defense table. Now this is like 2 years later, and I had been to. We had several trials already, and I'm walking by the defense table, and he says, "Donnie, how could you do this? You were one of us." And I was saying, this is like 2 years later,
Mm-hmm.
we had, and I think a lot that's lost is that we married. When I say we, I'm talking about the FBI. We were able to marry the Bonanno family up with Frank Balistreri, the mafia family out of Milwaukee,
Mm-hmm.
through Chicago, do illegal business, and also this case, I was able to marry up the Bonanno family with Santo Trafficani, the boss of Florida,
Yeah.
which is lost a lot in how important that was in the even in the movie. Uh, the importance isn't really brought out,
Right.
and it's not it's not really brought out how important that was. We're able to marry up the Bonanno family with two different mafia families to conduct business. That hasn't happened before, and it hasn't happened since.
Sure.
So is there anything, looking back now, is there anything different you would do if you had the chance to do it all over again?
I probably would have tried to put more people in jail.
What was it, 100 or so? Is that
It's the last count with all the trials. It is 240 some,
Wow.
and we didn't put street bums in jail. And every major mafia case after ours had information in their indictments from our case.
Hmm. Wow.
So we were, our information is involved in every major mafia investigation and case after ours.
well, yeah. I mean, even the structure that you put together, seeing the hierarchy, where
Yeah.
it started and how that continued. And, I was working there years later, and just to see the common names, all the names you've mentioned, even though they were
Hmm.
before my time, it was just interesting to see it all come together. And knowing
Yeah.
that you had a part in identifying them and putting the pieces together with
Well,
the other families as well.
we we identified, some of the Sicilians, Sal Catalano, and
Hmm.
Caesar Bonaventure, Baldo Amato. In fact, those guys testified against me at the sit downs.
Really?
Uh,
Man.
so,
Did you ever like fear for your life when you were, I guess undercover or?
well, every day once you're in it, it's not fear for your life, but like I said prior, you got to be careful in who you talk to and the conversations. I found out the best thing to do is not to BS anybody.
Right.
Uh, and that's what I did. I always was straightforward in my conversations, because Lefty Ruggiero, I mean, he could recall conversations that I had with him 3 years prior.
Hmm.
And he'd say, "Donnie, I don't think that's not what you told me, you know." And so,
That's
you know,
interesting. You know, so like one thing, as you were talking about it, like when you went into the undercover investigation, right? Was there a particular mission? Was there someone or something specific that was your original sort of task, or was it just get yourself immersed and let's see what we come up with?
no, actually, it was try to infiltrate the fences that were dealing with the mafia. All right. Now, fences are guys
Yeah.
that middle stolen commodities or goods. That was the initial premise, because we didn't think we can get that close to the mob,
Right.
So, but I was fortunate, lucky enough that bypassed the fences and went right to the mob guys, right to the mafia guys.
So how much of that was dictated by just how your investigation went, or the goal of the bureau? Did they just pretty much let you work your way through it and hopefully
Well,
come up with this?
pretty much worked my way through it. Back in the day, it was New York, and then there was headquarters, and,
Yep.
New York
Oh
didn't
yeah.
much listen. New York didn't much listen to Washington. Uh,
That didn't change much in recent years either.
so, uh, and like I said, Guy Barato, I don't know if he was long gone before your time,
Yeah.
Josephine, but Guy was you know, he was a force in the New York office. He was a New Yorker, grew up in the Bronx, and had done undercover work when there was no undercover at all. Uh, and so we just wanted because undercover operations were on 6 month,
Extensions
not
and so.
cycles, but and I was into like the 5th month and not really coming up with anything, but other than, hey, I know these guys are here, these guys are here, so we just kept it going, and that's how it went. Yeah. And then once I made that infiltration into the Colombos, and then it was like, whoa,
Yeah. Yeah.
these are real wise guys. And then when I got into the Bananos, it was again, this is who I'm hanging out with, and all these names were known Banano guys, and so that's how we kept going.
To piggyback onto that point, what you just said, was there an aha moment where you just felt like, man, I have something here. I mean, this is not what we got into it for, what we expected, but I got something big here. Was there a specific moment that you remember?
Well, I think yeah, when I got out uh, to Brooklyn with Jilly's crew, because he was a made guy, and a couple other guys in his crew were made guys, and you're hanging out now with made guys,
Right.
and they're discussing criminal activity with you. So
Hmm.
yeah, that was uh, and then then it got more intense once I left them and start downtown with the Bananos, because now I'm down in Little Italy, you
Mhm.
know, and then actually Tony Mirror, I hung out with him for a few months, which was, I dreaded it because the guy was just mean. He brought me to meetings with capos that were in the Colombos, and so uh, it was like, this thing is like now snowballing.
Right.
So since you have been pulled out of it, obviously, has there ever been a time that you ran into anybody from that life while you were civilian?
Well, a couple times. One time it was funny. I was doing a documentary, and we're walking down Little Italy, walking down Mulberry Street,
Mhm.
and I hear somebody holler, "Hey, Donnie, what the, what are you doing here? Haven't you done enough effing damage down here?"
Oh, really?
And
Wow.
it was one of the Gallo brothers.
Huh.
Okay.
So I turned around and said, obvious not, because I didn't put you in jail. So, but
I give you credit.
he laughed, and But hey,
It's
I don't mean to cut you short, but I got to pick up my granddaughter at 10:30.
not at all.
This,
No.
this is this is my gangster life now.
Well,
Back to family life. It's a priority.
that,
It's the
absolutely.
best. It's the best.
Joe, just if you could leave us with, and I think we'll be able to sort of wrap it up at that point. If you could leave us with sort of, um, for those that are doing undercover work today and will be in the future, if you had to leave with just a couple of pieces of sort of advice for those folks, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. One is, again, know your enemy.
Yeah.
Know your enemy.
Mhm.
Read The Art of War. You got to know your enemy to defeat your enemy. And again, I find that most undercovers don't. They don't study their enemy.
Yeah.
Uh, and don't fall in love with working undercover.
Mhm.
Just take it as another form of an investigation.
Hmm.
That's about it.
That's fantastic. We really, again, we're very grateful that you joined us today, and thank you very much for your time. We'll put, your contact information. Joe's written some books. We'll put all that information in the
Oh,
description of
thank
the
you very
podcast.
much. Yeah.
And until next time, maybe we'll do a part two of this. But thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Joe.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day.
You
You too.
too. Take care. Don't forget to follow us. We are on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.